spotlight for everybody and add to spotlight. All right, cool, guys. So, welcome to the well anticipated Vegan Rabbi and Perfect Foods collaboration class that I am extremely excited about. Thank you, everybody, for being here. There's a few reasons why I'm extremely excited about that. Number one, those of you who don't know me, my name is Rebecca. To the left of me is the Akiva Gersh, the vegan rabbi, and I will give him a proper intro in a moment. But I just want to share, introduce myself a little bit for a moment and just share why I think this is a really important and sort of legendary event we have going on here. So I am the owner, the new owner, co-owner with my brother of Perfect Foods, which is a wheatgrass and microgreen farm. As you can see, my sprouts behind me. And we have a quite large farm in Goshen, New York. I know I seem kind of silly and goofy, but it's actually a very large production, and we sell to the entire tri-state area, and we actually ship to the entire world. I'm sorry, the entire country, soon to be world. I'm manifesting. We ship living foods. We ship fresh living foods, and that is our primary focus. And I, a few years ago, woke up from a dream and realized that I wanted to make my primary focus to help Jewish people in particular to add more greens and healthy foods and living foods to their diet and more plants to their diet. Because as I am Jewish, I was noticing as I was keeping Shabbat and going to many Shabbat meals, there were a lot of these Shabbat dinners that just didn't have a big focus on healthy food, and definitely not plant-based or vegan food. Mostly it was chicken and the classic, Shabbat dinners, chicken soup and this and that. So I found that it was kind of discouraging as someone who puts a really big value on taking care of my body, that the Jewish community as it wasn't making that a focus, even though it does say so in the Torah, and I know that. And maybe it came down just from like a cultural traditional thing that it sort of got lost here and there, but it was a big turnoff for me. And I realized that just with a little bit of fun and a little bit of effort and a little bit of education, that it could go a really long way and make the Jewish people way more elevated in their connection to spirituality by having food that makes them feel connected as well. And the reason why I say that is because for me, I feel that plant-based foods and plants in general make me feel more connected and make me feel more spiritual. So the reason why I say that is because when you drink wheatgrass juice, I don't know, put a 1 in the chat for those of you who have ever had wheatgrass juice, but if you've ever had wheatgrass juice, it is a very vibrant plant. This is a concentrated green. So basically it's the same seeds that grow to become wheat, but it's at its 10-day-old stage. And when you harvest it and you juice it, 1 ounce is equivalent to having about 2.5 pounds of green vegetables. So having that in a drink and drinking it all at once is this very vibrant experience where you feel like you're drinking life. And that is what you're drinking. We know that it's a primary producer. All animal, large mammals that we know, like rhinoceroses and cows, eat grass primarily, exclusively. And they know that grass itself is a perfect food. It has all the vitamins and minerals in exactly the right proportion for what their bodies need to be fully nourished and to be healthy. So that is intuitive animalistic wisdom. And it turns out to really check out when we drink it and we see the way that it makes us feel. So when I drink a shot of wheatgrass, I can feel an immediate burst of energy, and also a ritual that I've been doing, and my mom actually inspired me to do, is to make a prayer on the wheatgrass shots when I drink it, because it really feels like it makes me very connected. So another point to that is that when we have our wheatgrass trees out at demos, people are so energetically like magnetized to wanting to touch the grass and touch the plants. We just have this like intuitive desire to want to touch grass. And that is something that has been like kind of really widely studied, especially the concept of grounding. Put a one in a chat if you've heard about the concept of grounding, that like we want to be connected with the earth, and we have this desire and this lack of, now more than ever, connection to nature. So especially those who live in cities, that you want to be connected to grass. And so it's pretty magnetic, and it's pretty obvious from every direction why drinking the juice of grass makes you feel alive. And then just one step further, it has a lot of enzymes. So anything, all that we grow, not only the wheatgrass, but the microgreens too, are babies of the plant. So they're 10-day-old plants. So this is radish that's only 10 days old. This is sunflower that's only 10 days old. This is fun. This is other radish. And then this is pea. Ah, you lost me. These are pea shoots. So those sugar snap peas that we love, that are delicious, this is what it looks like when it's only 10 days old. And it tastes just like it, but like times 100 because it's concentrated. And radish, you know how spicy radish is? You have the microgreen of it. Careful, like only have a little tiny piece. And sunflower, those beautiful sunflowers that we see, this is what it looks like when it's only 10 days old. And the reason why we plant and we grow it at this stage and we harvest it and we sell it that way is because it's very healing. It's medicinal. So when you have a plant at that stage, it has all the enzymes and the vitamins and the minerals at its concentrated form that would need in order to grow the large plant. And so when you consume it at this stage, now you're really having something extremely concentrated. Like I said, 1 ounce of wheatgrass juice is equivalent to having about 2.5 pounds of green vegetables. And broccoli sprouts in particular, people who have heard about broccoli sprouts and the benefits of that, it's been widely researched and talked about now. Broccoli sprouts are known to have 40 times the sulforaphane and other nutrients than adult broccoli, because it's in that baby stage. So I bring this up because it's not just about the increased amount of nutrients, but it's also about the enzymes. And the enzymes are what is so crucial when we have that like middle-aged feeling, when things start not working well, you start being achy and just not feeling like your optimal self. That is a depletion of enzymes. Our body is born with a certain amount of enzymes. And if we don't continuously eat foods that are alive, that actually have the enzymes in them, then we deplete them and we start not having enough to deal with the challenges of aging. And so if you're constantly consuming foods that have enzymes in them themselves, not only some, but a maximum amount, like these baby foods, and now you have enough enzymes to deal with any digestive issues, growing and repairing your body for anything that's needed while you're aging. And of course, any inflammation or digestive issues, or just generally making you feel alive and younger and more energized. So that's my little spiel that I hope you guys find powerful and interesting, that I've put together. And I've recognized that really dead foods, especially animal dead foods, make us feel tired and sluggish after a meal, after a Thanksgiving meal historically, right? After a Shabbat meal, if there's meat on the table, we feel tired. We feel like not alive, that's for sure. You eat a nice big sprout salad or a nice big salad, you feel alive. You feel energized. You feel satisfied, not hungry, but satisfied in a way that you're not used to feeling, because we don't usually eat those foods. That's the thing that's kind of peculiar about plant-based eating and especially living foods eating, is that you feel more satisfied than you would imagine, because you think you're just eating a little bit of plants. But because it has so much enzymes, and because someone has so much amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein, and because it has so much nutrients, your body is really nourished in a way that it's not used to. You're not just eating a bag of chips endlessly. You're eating a bag of sprouts and you're like, okay, I'm good. Not only am I good, but I feel like I could run around. I feel like I have extra energy to do what I need to do on my to-do list. I feel like I have superpowers. So to me, that's all pointing to the direction of, scientifically and from a nutrition standpoint, why living foods are good. And I know that we know that plants are good for us because we've been taught that forever. And this is just taking it one step further as to a way to get plants in an easy way. So that's my spiel. I hope that was inspiring to all of you. I'm totally going to put in my in the Zoom link here, information about perfect foods, how you can, we teach how to sprout, we teach you how to get seeds and actually sprout yourself for extremely inexpensive, no matter where you are, whether you're in an urban environment or anywhere that you have access to having living and plant-based foods for a very low cost. That's a major mission of ours, that there should be nobody who could say that they are in a food desert and they don't have access to food, because we can teach you how to grow it yourself very easily in just 3 days. So if you're interested, comment below maybe a 2 if you're interested in sprouting. And if you're interested in the getting into wheatgrass, I am always doing wheatgrass challenges where you can, do it every day for 10 days and start drinking it every day so you can really feel how it feels for yourself. And if you're interested in adding more living foods into your diet and you want to get a package of some sort, maybe, comment a 3 and I'll be sure to like message you guys later. You could also put your email, but I have all of your emails. So I'll be sending an email at the end of this class of how you can get like in touch with how to use this stuff. But we are here for the man of the hour, and that is all to say why what I just said makes any sense from a spiritual context, from actual historical, ancient wisdom, ancient text. So without further ado, please, let's all have a nice, quiet, silent round of applause for Rabbi Akiva Gersh, that is the vegan rabbi, and he's going to share with us some of his wisdom and inspiration on this topic.
Thank you, Rebecca. That was amazing and inspiring. I'm ready to order a huge bulk order straight here to Israel.
All over the world.
Exactly. We're going to get there. You're manifesting.
Yeah.
Really great to be here, and really thanks for sharing that. Hello, everybody. Shalom from Israel. My name is Akiva Gersh. I'm originally from New York, as you might tell from my accent. I moved to Israel with my wife, Tamara, 19 years ago. And amongst other things, one of the things that I do, but it's become one of the main things I do recently, is something called Vegan Rabbi, which is an online platform for sharing ancient Jewish teachings that promote compassion for animals and support going vegan in our world today from 4 main perspectives, vantage points. 1 is animal welfare. Number 2 is environmental stewardship. Number 3 is human health. And number 4 is spirituality, right? So we're kind of like talking about the intersection of number 3 and 4, human health and spirituality. And I'm going to share a few teachings here. Know that it's just the beginning of the beginning, a drop in the bucket. There's so much more out there to talk about in general when it comes to Judaism and veganism and the impact of our food choices on the world and on various levels and spheres of the world. But we're going to focus on specifically spirituality today, as Rebecca said, and we'll share a few teachings. And then we'll turn it over to all of you to see if you have any questions, right? And please feel free, if you have already questions, either put them in the chat or write them down. Don't forget them. We'll be happy to hear them afterwards. I'm just going to put in the chat right now for those who are on my website. It's very easy, akivagersh.com. For those who are watching this recorded, akivagersh.com. You can also find me online, Facebook. Put in Vegan Rabbi, Instagram, if you're on Instagram, Vegan Rabbi, you can find me easily. And yeah, so let's begin. There's a few main teachings that I want to share. So we're talking about spirituality and food. We had this amazing start from Rebecca, who built this foundation to really getting to this idea of food as life, right? Food gives us life. Food is the energy for life. And of course, I mean, Judaism talks about everything, right? We're a tradition that goes back, 3,300 years old. So of course, we have something to say about every aspect and facet of life, including health. And there's so much that Judaism says about health. There are chapters and chapters of laws that have to do with health in Judaism. There are books that have to do with health. There are major rabbis who were doctors in the past. Maimonides, going back 800, 900 years, just being one of them. So really, of course, especially before our modern day times when everyone kind of became like, really good at one thing, back in the ancient past, people were good at many things and they had this really broad understanding and knowledge of life and what gave life and how we live life and what there was around us in the world and what God put into the world. If you look at some of the passages from the Talmud, the rabbis of the Talmud, they seem like botanists. and animal experts and experts about the stars, because they knew all the different realms and all the different spheres of life. So let's share a few teachings, okay, that have to do with this specific intersection of food, Judaism, and spirituality. Okay, and of course, veganism is tied to all of that. Let's go back to the beginning. Literally the beginning, the first chapter of the book of Genesis. I mean, it's amazing. I was just talking to someone not that long ago. This great guy, kind of like a colleague of mine. I was doing some work with him. Orthodox Jew his entire life. And he knows I'm vegan, and he brings it up every now and then with me. And it just kind of came up in conversation. I'm like, like Adam and Eve were vegan, right? He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, it says it in the Torah. He's like, where? I'm like, really? Like, you're like 50 something years old. You've been studying the Torah your whole life, basically. Isn't that obvious? He's like, no, where is it? And it was very interesting, not coming from like a judgmental place, but like, it's not like an esoteric teaching. It's not like a hidden, like, oral teaching. It's in the written text, chapter 1 of the book of Genesis, Bereshit, verse 29. Right? Let's read it like right from the text. Let's go to the Chabad website, right? And get the English translation. It says, okay, and God said, behold, I have given you every seed-bearing herb, which is upon the surface of the entire earth, and every tree that has seed-bearing fruit, it will be yours for food. That was the diet that God gave to Adam and Eve and to all of humanity at the beginning. And though Adam and Eve will be kicked out of the garden just a few hours later, literally, the diet stays with them their entire lives, right? Their entire lives. According to Jewish tradition, they live for 930 years, okay? But that diet will last all the way up until the generation of Noah, and will only change after the flood for various reasons, which we won't go into right now, okay? So that alone, all right, the fact that in the very beginning, when God creates this perfect world, right? This perfect world, when the humans were created, it was the only time that God said, and it was tov ma'od, and it was very good. Every other day except for one got a tov, got a good, got a thumbs up. We got the 2 thumbs up, right? So the world was created, the world was prepared. The humans were in the Garden of Eden, and everything was great, and everything was perfect until it wasn't, right? Just a few hours later. But I think more than just interesting, it's very, very important to note that in Judaism, the Garden of Eden, Gan Eden, as we call it in Hebrew, is a symbol of the perfected world, of the world that we once had, the world that we fell from, and the world that we're striving to get back to. Right? So I mean, just put one and one together, right? If in the Garden of Eden they were eating basically like grass and fruit, I mean, really, a lot of people say, oh, it was a vegetarian diet. No, it was a vegan diet. But not only that, it was like a raw food vegan diet. I mean, hello, look at, it was like sprouts and grasses and fruit. It was like a grassitarian, fruitarian kind of diet. Literally, just like according to the literal text.
The Garden of Eden. Yeah.
Garden of Eden. That was the Garden of Eden, right?
That's it.
And I mean, how much more obvious can the Torah and can the Jewish tradition get? Again, it's not some like modern day interpretation. It's not some hidden esoteric teaching that nobody ever sees. It is in the main text, 29 lines in, that God gives a diet that is based on living foods, like alive, living, easily accessible foods. Right? And that's all we needed. And that's all we got because that's all we needed. Right? So just that in and of itself is very, very powerful. And it's also interesting and important to note that the Garden of Eden itself, besides being a symbol of what we're trying to get back to, right, this fallen state that we're trying to raise ourselves back up to, it itself was a heightened, elevated spiritual reality. When Adam and Eve were in the garden, it wasn't a normal place to live, right? I mean, there's a midrash, there's an oral teaching that says there were no shadows in the Garden of Eden. I mean, just think about that for a second. There are no shadows in the Garden of Eden. We can talk about that for like hours. We're not going to, right? But the one way that I understand that is that the physical and the spiritual meshed in the Garden of Eden in a way that we can't even understand or fathom in this post-Garden of Eden reality, right? And when we see what food they were given to eat, it helps us to understand what food we're supposed to eat, right? If we're trying to infuse our physical lives in this physical world with spiritual awareness and spiritual consciousness, which is what we're supposed to be doing, that's what Judaism talks about all the time. I just think about the classic, symbol for Judaism, the Magen David, the Jewish star, the Star of David, right? It is a triangle going up and a triangle going down, and they're overlaid one on top of the other. The triangle going up is pointing to heaven. The triangle going down is pointing towards the earth, and they're meshed together, right? To show that we're in this physical world, but we're meant to infuse with spirituality. We're spiritual beings, but we're meant to live in this physical world. We're not supposed to run away from the physical world, right, and just be spiritual. And we're not meant to forget about the spiritual and just be physical. We're meant to really, mesh them both together, led by the spiritual. That was the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden was that reality of the meshing of the two. And again, when you look at what they were eating, what was their fuel? I mean, like if you saw like a race car that was like the best race car in the world, wouldn't you want to know what kind of fuel it was given? Yes, it's the tires and it's the body and it's the aerodynamics and all those other things. But like one of the most important things, if not the most important thing, is what's the fuel that's going into that car, right? So, same with us. What's the fuel that's going into us? Of course, Judaism allows us to eat all kinds of things. But and that's a whole other discussion as well. Even if permission was given, that doesn't mean it's an obligation. Right? Permission was given for various reasons. I'll just share one for the sake of our conversation. Shared by one of the greatest rabbis, I think, of all time. It's definitely the past 500 years, if not 1,000 years, Rabbi Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, the first chief rabbi of Free State Israel, who lived from 1865 to 1935. And he said the reason that the diet was changed after the flood in the generation of Noah is because humanity fell from their heightened moral and spiritual level, and they can no longer maintain that higher level of morality. Well, or they didn't, right? And the diet, the changing diet, reflected that they fell morally and spiritually, and therefore the diet changed with them. That wasn't the ideal. It was, as we call it in Hebrew, b'diavad. It was okay, now that happened, so we'll kind of go with it. But that wasn't the way that wasn't the original plan. Let's say that. So that's a little bit about the Garden of Eden, right? Let's just go through a couple other things. In Judaism, I remember when I was a kid, we had this show on TV with this guy, Mr. Body. I don't know if anyone ever saw it. There was this like health guy, and he wore like this bodysuit that showed all the different organs and parts of the body. And he was really dynamic and energetic, and he drank juice, and everyone was like, really? Like, why would you, juicing back then was like not really a thing. And anyway, it was an interesting show. Somehow all of us kids who ate junk food still watched it. But he would always say, you are what you eat. That's like the one line I always remembered him saying. I never understood what he meant by that as a kid, and even for years I didn't understand. What do you mean you are what you eat? Like I'm a donut. Like I'm a piece of pizza. Like what does that mean? The truth is, yeah, if you're eating donuts, then you're a donut, and if you're eating pizza, then yes, you are a slice of pizza with all the oil dripping off the end. And if you're sprouts, and if you're salads, and if you're living foods, and if you're fresh foods, and if you're vegetables, then that's who you are. Because we know both scientifically and Jewishly, right, that our food turns into blood, into our blood, right? Our food becomes our blood. And Judaism is talking about this for thousands of years, even before modern science has been talking about it, modern nutrition. Right, so literally, we are what we eat, and Judaism goes a step further and says, in many times, the Torah says in many places that the nefesh is in the dam, the soul, an aspect of the soul is in the blood. So once again, we see this convergence of physical and spiritual. We see that our physical food that we eat becomes our physical blood, and at the same time, the blood is on some level like a house for our soul. On some level, right? At least one aspect of our soul. Our soul is actually very complicated according to Jewish mysticism, right? So here, once again, we see, this physical and spiritual merging. So if we are what we eat, and our food becomes our blood, and our blood is like a conduit, a house of sorts for our soul, then of course, what we eat is going to have such a great impact on us physically and spiritually. And if I'm eating junk food all day, God forbid, not only, God forbid, will someone get physically sick, they will get spiritually sick. What does it mean to get spiritually sick? Less in tune, less aware, and less connected.
Yeah.
Right? And our job in this world, according to Judaism, is to be more aware and more in tune and more connected.
Yeah.
And you look at the mystics of our tradition, and every generation has them, and you see the rabbinic leaders, right? What are they teaching us? to yes, we're in the physical world, but don't get overwhelmed by the physical world. Use the physical world as a kli, as a tool, in order to, become spiritually elevated, closer to God, bring God into this world more through living in the physical world, but with that spiritual mindset. And again, if we are slowing ourselves down, like Rebecca was saying before, if we're sluggish and slow and because of the foods that we eat, we can't do the spiritual work that we're here to do. We can't be the spiritual beings we're meant to be. My Maimonides said that over 800 years ago. He said, if someone, God forbid, gets sick, my mom, I mean, lots of people, lots of rabbis talked about the importance of health. Again, it's in the Torah in a couple different places, the obligation to take care of our health, an obligation. Think about it. In Judaism, I know it doesn't seem that way, by looking at Jewish communities always, but forget the communities, forget the people. Like years ago, a rabbi once said, he said, don't judge Judaism by the actions of Jews, find out about it for yourself. Right? So if you look in the texts, it's an obligation in Judaism to take care of your health, just like it's an obligation to keep kosher, to keep Shabbat, and to put a mezuzah on your doorpost. It's the same level of obligation to take care of your health. That's like a davar yadua. It's like a known thing. It's like hands on. Everyone accepts that, right? And so, if my mom says that if someone is, God forbid, not taking care of their health and they get sick, they can't do what they came in the world to do. It affects their spiritual mission. So, eating healthy, eating vibrantly, eating with awareness, consciousness, and knowledge, not only gives us a physical health, which is great, it allows us to be who we came into this world to be and do the work that we came into this world to do, right? Including our spiritual work. So again, all of this overlaps together and intertwines so beautifully in Judaism, right? And of course, let's take it one step further. If we are what we eat, right, and if people are eating foods that come from animals in our modern day world, and someone got into an argument with me the other day. He said, "You said that 99% of the meat that people eat today comes from factory farms. I think it's more like 90%, right?" I'm like, okay, I've seen 99% a million times. If you want to say 90%, fine, But the point is, most of the food products that come from animals, meat, dairy, eggs, and fish, are coming from industries. Whether you want to say it's 99% or 90%, coming from the factory farm world, where they don't care about the animals. They treat them like products. They treat them like a bag of potato chips, right? To be moved down the assembly line and to be treated like a nothingness non-being. And they're living lives of pain and suffering their entire lives, right? And they're breaking many Jewish laws along the way, those who are doing this, right? Including up into and including the moment of slaughter. Even if the actual slaughter of these animals for meat is considered kosher, all kinds of other laws are being broken. Very often, one law is that one animal cannot be in view of another animal being slaughtered. Think about the fear. I mean, now with social media, we see these videos all over the place. When I became vegan in 1995, we didn't see any of this stuff. We had to find a book in like some random place in the library, to learn about this stuff. Now it's everywhere. Every time I open up a social media, obviously because of the people I follow, but I'm seeing these videos like crazy, right? And you see when they smell death in the air, when they see their fellow animals being slaughtered, what do you think is happening inside of them? They're freaking out, and there's hormones and chemicals being released, chemicals of fear, anxiety, stress. Moments later, they're killed, and those emotions in the form of chemicals are being trapped in their bodies. Their bodies get chopped up and served to people to eat. People are ingesting that. So not only are they ingesting the horrible things that they put in the animal food, including hormones and antibiotics, they're literally ingesting the fear, the anxiety, and the stress that these animals have been through their entire lives, up into and including the moment of death. That's not going to do so well for the body or for the soul. Right? So when we're talking about Judaism and diet, Judaism and veganism, and we see what's happening behind the scenes, although today it's not so much behind the scenes, thank God, because people have done plenty of documentaries and taken all kinds of videos and have borne witness to what's going on there and shared it with the world. We know what's happening, right? It's not hidden anymore. It used to be hidden, right? Even though they still try very hard to hide it, we know what's going on. And so therefore people are knowingly ingesting this food, and God forbid, I mean, I feel so bad for the animals, of course, I also feel so bad for the humans who are eating this. It's doing so much physical and spiritual damage to them, right? And it's inhibiting them from being who they can be and how they can be in this world. A couple other points, and then I'll turn it over to everybody if anyone has any questions. But it's very interesting. I remember learning this years ago, and I was really blown away by this. In the Hasidic world of thought and teaching, the idea of a tzaddik is very, very important. A righteous person. A righteous person is like someone who's really taken spiritual work to a whole nother level and has reached a very, very high level of spiritual awareness, and has become a great teacher to a lot of people. And so one of the Hasidic masters of recent generations says over and over again in his book, it's a book called Nitivot Shalom. He says over and over again, he says that tzaddik primarily, a righteous person, primarily becomes a righteous person from how they eat, right? Through eating. How we eat, what we eat, everything around our food choices, our way of being around food and when we're eating, which we'll talk about in a moment, can literally, make or break it in terms of someone becoming a tzaddik or not. Someone becoming a righteous person. Someone can know tons and tons of Torah.
Yeah.
And work on themselves, all these things. And if they haven't fixed that thing around eating, but what we eat or what they eat and how, they're still going to be very limited in terms of the spiritual level that they could reach. The last thing I want to share is this. All right. There's a very interesting passage in the Talmud, in a section called Pesachim, that says that an Amma Aretz is translated usually in English as an ignoramus, someone who's not so knowledgeable about the law. Okay, so an ignoramus, an Amma Aretz, is prohibited to eat meat. It says it in the Talmud. All right, and the Talmud itself doesn't go into the explanation why. But of course, there's all kinds of rabbis and commentaries that do. And one basic kind of on the simple level understanding of that is that someone who's not knowledgeable about the law won't know about the complicated laws of kashrut, and they'll probably mess things up. And it's better if they don't, eat animals at all, so they stay away from, potentially breaking the law of the Torah. In terms of the shechting, the slaughtering, in terms of the salting that comes afterwards, and in terms of milk, mixing milk and meat, all kinds of laws that could be broken if somebody eats meat. That's one simple understanding, right? In Judaism, we have the simple understanding, and then we have layers of depth, deeper understandings, right? So the deeper, if not the deepest understanding, is brought down by a Jewish mystic from Iraq. His name was the Ben Ish Chai, Rabbi Yosef Chaim, and he fused the Jewish law with all kinds of Jewish mystical teachings. He was in the previous generation. And he quotes one of the spiritual giants of all of Jewish history who lived in the 16th century in Jerusalem, then Egypt, and then Sfat. His name is Rabbi Isaac Luria. He's known as the Arizal, or the Ari. Okay, there's a couple of synagogues in Sfat that are named after him. And so the Ben Ish Chai quotes the Ari by saying the following: why is an ignoramus not permitted to eat meat? Because he won't know how to properly do the spiritual elevation while eating the meat. What is that talking about? Spiritual elevation while eating meat? Like, what's that? So it's a whole topic, usually takes hours to talk about. We'll do it in a couple of minutes. Okay, and with this we'll close. Judaism, let's zoom out for a second and then we'll get back into that. Judaism can be summed up in one idea or concept, and that is that we are here to fix the brokenness in the world. The physical brokenness, the spiritual brokenness, at every aspect of the Torah, all 613 mitzvot, commandments, are all a different way, a different opportunity to fix the brokenness that is in this world and that has been in this world since shortly after creation. Okay? It's about fixing the brokenness of this world. One of the most powerful ways to fix the brokenness, according to Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, right? If I said this in my own words and said I came up with this idea, like people would never, buy it or believe it probably. But it's ancient. It goes back thousands of years. It's an ancient Jewish idea that one of the most powerful ways that we fix the world is through our eating. Through our eating. This is not my own idea. I love it. I'm into it. It's not my own idea. I'm quoting it from major, major sources. Okay? And it's the idea that not only what we eat is important, right? Judaism talks a lot about kosher food, of course, but how we eat. What am I doing at the time of eating? What am I thinking about? Am I being mindful? Now, at the deepest level, if you really get into it and you look at these sources, eating, I know, again, you don't really see it, but eating in Judaism is supposed to really be a meditation, a time of contemplation, a silent act, even though Jews never do that, right? Even when we're not eating, we're not really quiet, right? But really, if you take these mystical teachings to life and apply them, every time we eat, but especially on Shabbat and especially on the holidays, we would be eating as a meditation. And I know there's some people out there in the world who are into that and do that. And whenever I have done that, it's very, very powerful. So it's the idea of not only what we eat, but how we eat is very, very important. And why? Because when we eat, we have the ability to lift up lost sparks of holiness that have been trapped in creation, in the physicality of creation since the time of creation. Okay, because Kabbalah talks about that shortly after creation, things went cosmically wrong and things broke, and there was this brokenness kind of embedded all into creation. And our spiritual work in this world is to elevate those broken sparks of holiness.
Or bring it together.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Raise them up, bring them back to their source. And one of the most powerful ways to do that is through conscious eating. Okay, so back to that teaching from the Talmud, the Kabbalah says the hardest food to elevate the sparks from is food from animals. So therefore, it makes sense on a spiritual level as well. An ignoramus who doesn't, know that much, doesn't know how to do this, and therefore is not only you shouldn't, not only is better if you don't, prohibited. The Talmud says asur, prohibited from eating meat. Now, that was 1,500 years ago that those words were written down. With all due love and respect to all my fellow tribe members out there, I think all of us, compared to that generation, would be considered ignoramuses, right, in comparison. So my question is, who is alive today who can say, yes, I have the ability to eat food in such a way that I am so deeply focused and so deeply contemplating what I'm doing when I eat it, that I can lift up these sparks from the animals that I'm eating. Okay, so that's one. And you know what the truth is? I think that there probably are a handful of really big mystics out there who probably in our generation still can do that. But the vast majority, let's say even 99% again, to use that number, right? Can't do that. I've seen my very close friends who I love so much, right? And are really deep, meaningful, spiritual people, really focus on like bettering themselves. I see them when they're eating meat, and it's like how do you say that? Finger licking good, right? It's just like it's like a barbecue. It's a party. It's hey, pass me another big plate of meat. There's really not that deep focus and concentration and intention happening that is supposed to be happening according to these traditional Jewish teachings. And the last thing I'm going to say is that even if someone did have that ability today to do that, would they still choose? If they were on that high of a level spiritually, right, and they know what's going on in the factory farming world, and they know about all the pain and suffering that's happening to these animals, for them to have that plate of whatever, chicken wings, beef, whatever, would they still choose to eat the animals? Would they still choose to support those industries? I think not. Right? If they're on a higher level, then I believe, humbly speaking, that they would choose to not eat that kind of food today because of the destruction and the pain and the suffering that it's bringing to God's creations and to God's creation, but rather choose a diet that is so accessible to us today, that is so easy as compared to previous generations, of simple foods, healthy foods, living foods. Let's go back to the Garden of Eden diet, right? The way that God wanted it in the beginning. Right, to choose to eat foods that nourish our body and as a result nourish our soul, build blood that is a beautiful home to the soul, right, and brings more compassion to the world through not adding this pain and suffering to animals and doing their very best to limit the destruction that is being brought to or placed upon God's creation. So just maybe a last sentence: living foods, sprouts, wheatgrass, good healthy food choices, right? The amazing foods that God has blessed this world with, blessed us with, the abundance of amazing, beautiful, healthy, nutritious living foods.
Yeah.
It's, as you learn about it more and more and more, and what it does to us physically, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, right? It becomes a very, very clear choice that this is so deeply in line with so many Jewish teachings that stretch back thousands of years.
Amen.
Thank you,
Um,
Rebecca. Thank you for all of this and organizing this. And thank you, everyone, for coming. It's really an honor to be able to share here. Thank you so much.
well, huge, huge, huge thank you for that. I have a couple of things that I want to say just to like little additions to what you were saying. First was what you were saying about the mindfulness, right? Just, I mean, exactly what you just said, but I just want to emphasize it. That the mindfulness of eating being something that is not only asked but requested and a necessity, that is something that I've learned from like these raw food institutes that I've got a lot of my education from. My family got a lot of our education from. They have a lot of wisdom in them too. They're not from 15,000 years ago, but they're still pretty old compared to what science knows now. So before a lot of the modern science was talking about this, and almost like everything that they talk about at these raw food institutes is so like deeply wise, and they recommend 1500, sorry, thanks. And they are the ones who say to have wheatgrass. They're the ones who say to have sprouts, that that's the primary optimal foods to be eating. They're the ones who say to have fruits and raw living foods. And they're also the ones that talk about mindfulness, and they talk about yoga, and they talk about meditation. I also want to say, just to bring in a few other people that all lead to the same concept. Like, it's not just the two of us, and it's not just, you know, one rabbi. It's there. If you look at all avenues of spirituality, all avenues of science now, almost many avenues of science, and anybody who really takes a close look at it and is mindful when they're actually thinking about it is pointing towards this reality. So it's just really cool to see this come to fruition, especially from the old wisdom that didn't have the science to back it up. And I just want to say that the old wisdom from these institutes would talk really a lot about the mindfulness of eating. In fact, they would say to chew your food 30 times before you swallow. And that is not only for digestion, but also for meditation. That's number one. And number two was, I wanted to talk about digestion and how meat and all meat products and shrimp, a lot of the non-kosher foods in particular, seafood and meat products take the longest for your body to digest. They say about 5 hours, while plants take about 30 minutes. And definitely, like living foods, even less, because they're already pre-digested with the enzymes. So as far as how your body was designed, majority of the energy that our body uses to exert is towards digesting, when you're digesting really heavy foods. And when meat is a really heavy food and takes a lot of energy to digest, and it is being exerted, now you're using all of that energy that you couldn't be using for doing things and being active and being spiritual. And if you could you save time and save energy for your body by having living foods, having the Garden of Eden, that is the fundamentals. That's the basics of how we were designed. We were designed in a certain way. Now we should be honoring the way that we were designed, not only from a physical place, but from a spiritual place. And as we can see from Rabbi Akiva, how we were designed from a spiritual perspective. I mean, it's kind of mapped out. He just mapped it out. How were we designed from a spiritual perspective, if you believe that? And then I just want to take it one step further, because I know not everybody on here is Jewish, that it's totally relatable for whether you're Jewish or you're not Jewish, because this is a spiritual concept. This is something that you can see from the Torah. The Torah, of course, is the foundation of all of the other, of those main religions. But even beyond that, you're going to find mindfulness. You're going to find in Buddhist and Eastern medicine, what in the Eastern world, they barely have meat in their diets, and in Indian restaurants and in Asian restaurants, if you go to an authentic one, a lot of the dishes are vegetarian. And if you look at the China study, they found that the areas in China that were eating meat were a lot less healthy than the areas in China that weren't eating it. So this has been shown through every single part of the world and every single aspect. And it's just so fascinating to dig into it a million times in a million different ways, all pointing to the same truth. So I hope that's inspiring to all of you. And let's get into some cool questions. All right. So appreciate Eva for playing hooky to watch this. She goes, I'm playing hooky from work. Okay. Sue, question for later. Meet obligations versus option allowance. I have learned Jewish friends. The husband studied in depth for 3 years. The wife insists over, okay, this is yada yada. I stopped trying to convince her otherwise years ago. She's fighting a health battle that I know it would help her to go vegan. What would you do to help her, and what can I do? So somebody who has, do you want to, okay, so somebody who has, weren't clear on what the issue was, that the Bible mandates that, people who say that the Bible mandates that we eat meat, what should I do to convince them that that's not true? That's interesting. Do you have anything to say on that, Rabbi Akiva?
Yeah, first I would ask them to share the verse that says one must eat meat.
Thou shalt eat meat.
Yeah, that verse doesn't exist.
No, I know.
Somebody.
Okay, just gotta mute everybody.
People need to mute if they're.
Just muted. Okay.
Well done. Yeah, so that verse doesn't exist. Thou shall eat meat. There is permission given to eating meat for sure. That's very obvious, right? I would never say, because I could never say that Judaism doesn't allow for the eating of animals. It does. Permission was granted, but that doesn't translate into obligation, except for there was only one time and one place where there was an obligation to eat animals sometimes. And that was in the temple in Jerusalem that stood 2 different times, and the tabernacle that stood before that, a total of about 1300 years throughout Jewish history. So we're talking about a bit more than a third of Jewish history when we were offering sacrifices, right? The Torah does talk a lot about animal sacrifices. When that was happening, that was the only time that that there was an obligation to eat animals. But that was only in Jerusalem, only from sacrifices and only certain sacrifices. So that doesn't mean most people were not eating meat every day. They were very rarely eating obligatory meat. Even the priests, because they changed shifts so often, they were only really working there a couple of days a year. Anyway, without getting into that. But so we see outside of Jerusalem, outside the temple that used to stand, there's no obligation to eat meat. So you can't say the Bible mandates that we have to eat meat. It just doesn't exist. All right. Sometimes people will want to say, oh, but you have to eat meat on Yom Tov, on the Jewish holidays. That means Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. That's up for debate. All right. There's strong opinions that say it's not an obligation. All right. Some people call it a mitzvah, because the word mitzvah is used oftentimes in various ways, not always meeting obligation. In fact, one of the biggest Hasidic rabbis, who was also a major kind of how do you say teacher of Jewish law. He wrote his own law book basically. He said that it's a mitzvah to eat meat on Yom Tov, on the holiday, but not an obligation. Okay, so it's clear that it's not an obligation. But let's just say it was, but it's not. It's not. Even if it was, even if you want to say, okay, fine, you're right, it's an obligation to eat meat on Passover, Shavuot.
But what about it even being a mitzvah?
So we'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
That's 3 times a year. 3 times. 3 times a year. That's nothing, right? So all the other times that people are eating meat, including on Shabbat, right, and the other holidays, it's not fulfilling a mitzvah. It's not fulfilling an obligation, because there just is none. Why is it called a mitzvah? I'll say it is a complicated kind of topic, but I'll just try to say really quickly and very, very simply that on Yom Tov, on the holidays, there's a mitzvah to be happy, and on Shabbat there's a mitzvah to have pleasure. Right? So people say, from hundreds and thousands of years of just humans being humans in the world, people like certain kinds of foods, and it brings them happiness to eat certain kinds of food on Yom Tov, the holidays, and brings them pleasure to eat certain kinds of food on Shabbat. All right, so because people ate meat traditionally, so that kind of became mixed in with like fulfilling the mitzvah. It wasn't that it was a mitzvah to eat meat; it's a mitzvah to be joyous on the holiday, and it's a mitzvah to experience pleasure on Shabbat. And because we do that through food, that kind of got tangled up in that understanding. But when you really go in with, really clearly trying to understand what is the mitzvah on Shabbat, there's no mitzvah of eating meat. The mitzvah is to eat foods that bring you joy. And let's just say this as well, like how could it possibly bring me joy to know that I'm eating foods that come from industries that cause such pain and suffering to animals and are contributing disproportionately to the destruction of the world and to human health. And the same thing with Yom Tov. And again, I'll just say and close it, like Yom Tov, the holidays, the way of experiencing joy was very specifically connected to Jerusalem and to the temple. And in a post-temple era, it's really not the same thing. So long story short, there's no obligation to eat meat in Judaism anymore.
All right, beautiful. And that is a perfect
Segue.
to the next question, which was how to have the willpower to say no graciously to those who offer us things publicly or in their homes. And the reason why I feel that's a good segue is because when you have a fundamental understanding of that this is who I am and how I am, and this is what I enjoy eating. I enjoy eating really only plant-based foods, and that is where I actually authentically get joy. Then it becomes less of, oh, I can't have this, I can't have that, but this is what I eat. And like, so when it becomes more about what you eat versus what you don't eat, that's one thing. And then the other thing is, the more strong and confident you get in yourself with that, the easier it becomes to have a very gracious reaction to a family member offering you something, because it doesn't get that like awkwardness of, oh, I'm not supposed to eat this, like because somebody told me that it's not good for me, and like, or it's I feel guilty. It's not like that kind of like awkwardness. It's more like, thank you so much, that looks wonderful, I'm eating this right now, I brought something, I had something before, I'm all good, I'm here for you, I'm here to enjoy your company. And even I brought this so that you could try it, it's really delicious, do you want to try it? That's the energy that you bring to it. And now there's really no uncomfortableness. If there is in the beginning, it's just like, growing pains and like learning how to go about it, but it's not something that sticks really. And you learn to navigate it the longer that you do it. And it's a non-issue if it's something that you believe in and you enjoy. What do you think, Rabbi Akiva?
100% agree with everything you said, and I would just add or just reiterate that, right, when you're really committed and passionate about something, and you know that this is something that's really in line with good positive values, it gives you more of that strength to be confident in your response and your decisions and your being. And so if you're in a situation like that, you don't have to dishonor yourself and disrespect your own values in order to honor and respect somebody else, even a host. And I think, most people would really understand that and honor that and probably be curious and inquisitive. And chances are, I know this happened to me a million times when I used to be at Shabbat tables of people who I had just met, and they often found out that I was vegan, right then and there. And they felt so bad, like, oh, we didn't know this is not. I'm like, don't worry, there's like 5 salads on the table. I'm going to be just fine. Thank you. Like you said, Rebecca, I'm here for the experience. I'm here for the people, for the atmosphere. I have plenty to eat. Like literally, I can't remember one time in my life, being at a Shabbat table that I didn't have enough food to eat, even if the people didn't know it in advance. And it's really just, when people see that you're confident and you're committed, that's really powerful for them to see. And they honor that. So we don't need to shirk away or shrink away from what we believe. We need to really be, proud of who we are, and that can have a really great impact. And again, that could really create great conversation around these things, and really lead to great education to people who might not know about this.
Yeah, I mean, it's still I don't want to dismiss the question and just say, oh, it's very easy, it's a non-issue, because I understand that I remember having trouble with that, and I still even have trouble with it sometimes. So I don't want to completely dismiss it, because like there's that sort of familial feeling when you have like a family member or even a mother or like somebody, there's that family aspect of it that's like, I really, really, really want you to eat this food. Like it would mean a lot to me if you
Yeah.
would, if I could share my food with you. And for you to say no, it doesn't, it's hard. It is. So I want to just acknowledge that it is
100%.
like, you know what I mean? Because food, as you were saying, it's a major point of pleasure. It's a major point of community. It's a major point of our culture and of all cultures. And it's a big thing that we huddle around. So it's challenging. I'm not going to say that it's not, but it's all about conversations. And also, like, I am not going to be. I happen to not be the one to be an all or nothing type of person. I think Rabbi Akiva, maybe not all of it or nothing, but he's a lot more like
More of
this is it. Yeah,
that.
I am a lot more flexible with the way that I talk about this concept because because I come from a place of really focusing on adding more plants into your diet and letting that kind of like overflow your life rather than like taking away meat, rather than the mindset of I'm taking away meat, more so the mindset of I'm adding in plants. That's my philosophy on it. It worked for me psychologically the most. And I think everybody has a different personality and a different way of going about change and diet change. Diet change is one of the hardest things to do. So I'm totally acknowledging and like saying that's valid. So you got to figure out what works for you. Are you the type that's like, I'm cold turkey, like this is how I am and I'm doing it that way? Or are you the type that like, I really have trouble with that. If you tell me to do it like that and I fail, then like I judge myself and I'm never going to be able to do it. And like, there's something wrong with me. Like, totally don't internalize that and take it as you want to make sure that your mind is healthy too during the process, because that's really important. And as I've been doing this work for a long time, I've noticed for myself and for my clients that like everybody has a different personality when they go about things. And some people need to do it all or nothing. And some people need to slowly, gradually do it. So totally like listen to yourself and just, you know, whatever the goal is, if the goal is, yeah, this makes sense to me. I want to have more plants in my diet. I want to take away meat from my diet. Now the question is how, and we can talk about that after, like, how do we implement that for you? And I do help coach people for that. That is what I do full time. That is my job. And so if any of you are at that place where you're like, okay, this makes sense to me and I want to do this and I need help doing it because like I've been trying to do it for a while and I can't, or this just clicks for me and I definitely want to do it, but I think I need support. That's where I definitely can help you along the lines of like, here's what to eat. Here's exactly what to go shopping for and how to keep your fridge full. Here's how to prepare foods that are really easy so that you don't like feel overwhelmed. You don't know what to cook. Here's what like just fun ways to enjoy it rather than come from a place of like restriction. Anyway, okay. If we
I think
are meant,
Lisa has a question.
yeah,
Is
go
Lisa
ahead.
still here? I don't know if she's still here. She might have left. I don't see her in the thing. Lisa, you out there? No. So you want to go to a different question? I think Nechama has her hand raised. Is that right?
Oh, Nechama, yes.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much. I have been a vegan for at least about 8 or 10 years. I don't know, lost track. But and I do take B12. I'm just curious though about that whole thing because if our body was meant to be, be vegan, which I believe it is, why is B12 such an issue? And what are natural sources to get B12 from the vegan world? Thank you. Sorry.
That's a good question. So I don't know if Rebecca, I'll just say something quick and then pass it over to Rebecca. It's a really good question, right? We know that in our modern day food industry that we have lots of fortified foods with B12. People take, shots or vitamins or eat or drink fortified foods, right? But in terms of natural sources, I don't fully understand the science of it. It's something I should probably know better. But we know that there's many sources. It's not like a thing I have to like search deep into the desert to find. I can find it, I could access it, I can bring it into my diet very, very easily. So it's not a hard thing. It's just something that we have to be more conscious of and make sure that we get enough of. And there's many, many sources of it today. I mean, I have like nutritional yeast always in my fridge, which is fortified with B12. My plant-based milks are fortified with B12. And so thank God I've got my B12 levels checked numerous times throughout the years, and thank God I've always been fine and healthy with it. Rebecca, I don't know if you want to add anything to that in general, but maybe some more of the technical stuff, I'm not sure.
So B12 is found in some of the sea foods. So in like seaweed and spirulina and nori, things like that, you can find some B12. Even there's actually a trace amount in wheatgrass and barley grass. And shiitake mushrooms, certain mushrooms you can find a little bit in. So you can find a little bit in certain plants, not a lot, but I just recently saw some blood work. Well, I've done blood work for myself. And the thing with B12 is that when you have it, when you go plant-based, you don't have a depletion of B12 until like a long time. Like if you have meat and then you stop having meat, you're not going to have a depletion of B12 for like a really long time. So the thing with B12 of being like something that you have to be constantly having, like have meat all the time in order to have your meat B12 on, is not actually so accurate. But definitely most plant-based nutritionists and doctors, naturopathic doctors recommend always to have a B12 supplement just to be safe, because it definitely helps with brain health and like fatigue and all that stuff. So where to get it naturally, there are ways to get it naturally, but and I even just saw blood work of a few different friends of mine who were raw foods and vegan and fruitarians, and they actually had they didn't have an issue with their B12, and they had been for 10 years. So that was pretty interesting. So yeah, it's something that you can either take supplements for, or you can experiment with other foods and continuously take your blood work to see how you do. I think it's less of an issue than the world wants it to be.
Thank you.
I think Eva has a question.
Yes.
Hi.
Eva.
How are you?
Hey,
Okay,
Eva
so
Lovina.
I really appreciate you being here playing hooky in my office at school. I really like what you said about the Torah sources. Actually, the slav, which are quail, the Jewish people begged for the slav because they said the manna wasn't enough that fell from heaven. So they said that we need this love. And so God said you can eat what you desire. It wasn't an obligation, but you could eat what you desired, with the premise that what we're going to eat, we're going to elevate it. And that we do by saying the bracha, like Elise said. We say the bracha, the blessing, before we eat something as Orthodox Jews, and we say the post blessing. And in that way, it's mindful eating. There's a lot of emphasis put on mindful eating. And I've been going down to the Optimum Health Institute with the Matzels for years, and they talk about that a lot. And I think that it really it's in sync with the Torah about whatever you do eat, because we have free choice, right? Whether we desire meat or we desire vegan, which is, I call it the premium 91 unleaded, actually the premium unleaded 91 gas is probably raw food. And then we have vegan food. As we all know, you can eat dirty vegan too. Plant-based doesn't mean healthy prepared. Kosher doesn't mean healthy prepared. So I think if we elevate, there is a whole stream of thinking about elevating the food you eat by being mindful of what we eat. And that I think it's very important to state that we can't be in a cookie cutter box here, because there are some women that are pregnant that need extra iron and they can't get it other than meat. There are remedies through animal products, but again, these are exceptions. And these are instances where we're elevating the person, we're saving the person's life because they need a certain supplement like iron. I've been anemic. Of course, you could get that from fruits and vegetables, but that's going to be very hard to eat the amount that I or my mom would need for iron. So I would have to take an iron supplement pill, which I do. So I balance it out, but some people don't have that option. And we shouldn't put people into cookie cutters. But as far as the Torah, it absolutely supports veganism. But in the time of the temple, we will go back to sacrifices, which were elevated and spiritual straight to God. They were burnt on the altar and went straight to God. And that was, again, during a certain period of time when we were on the spiritual level to be able to accomplish that. I wanted to finally talk about addiction. I know this is about veganism and eating vegan versus meat. I think there's an addiction component, and that is also with processed foods, and that a lot of us are having struggles, not just with the idea of eating a little piece of meat or chicken or your grandmother's chicken soup, but it's all this awful processed food that we're eating that is really, really killing us. And of course, the GMOs and the pesticides. So I think that is also another conversation that we need to have about the processed foods, and that the wheatgrass actually cuts your cravings, cuts the addictions. So that's helpful. And I think as Orthodox Jewish people, I struggle immensely on Shabbos, for example, Sabbath, to stay away from it's not so much the little cholent. It's more so the cakes, the kugels, the high fat, the high sugar, the processed sugar, and that stuff is very, very difficult for me. So I just wanted to throw those out.
Yeah, so Eva, thank you for bringing that up. That it's not just about being plant-based when it comes to being spiritual and being healthy, that it's also about making sure that it's more whole foods and not processed. I don't know if it says that in the Torah. I don't know where it says don't have processed foods in the Torah, but it totally should.
Well, there wasn't processed foods before, a couple generations, so.
True. And if you look at the Garden of Eden, it does say that, explicitly that is having whole foods is really like the foundation of what we should be eating. And
Right.
when you start eating that way, the addictions start to go away. And I know, Eva, you've been on this process, and I know many of you have been on this process before, and it's like, okay, but then the second that it's around, it makes it really challenging, and you lean into it. So the whole concept of like addiction and the mental aspect of it can be really challenging. I think one of the things that make people really steadfast about it is this concept of morality. Because when you have to back up the decisions that you make with morality, and you consider yourself a moral person, it makes it a little bit more, I would almost say, easy to stick to your guns, because now like it's your name on the line. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I don't mean that to like pressure you or guilt you or anything. It's just something to think about. That like if you're finding that addiction is your problem, maybe go about it in a different way, less than a health way, but more of a moral way. I find that people who come to this from a moral perspective, they're very steadfast about it, and they don't have a question whether they're going to do it, they're not going to do it. It's just they're doing it. And when you can get stronger on that moral thing, I think that's what helps. What do you think about that?
What does moral mean? What do you mean?
Rabbi Kiva, why don't you share about that?
I agree. I mean, that's right. I mean, yeah, that could be like a whole nother program just on that. But I mean, I grew up eating really poorly, lots of junk food, lots of processed food, barely any fruits, no vegetables. And so what motivated me to change my diet was exactly what you're saying. I mean, I literally did a 180 flip. I was like the last person anyone ever expected to eat, a vegan, healthy diet. And what motivated me was, at least what first motivated me, was very much the morality aspect of it, the ethics. And that was a very, very strong motivator to say no to things that I had said yes to for years, and I barely said yes to anything else. So I absolutely agree with that. And I also and Eva really understand like the physical addiction, like sugar and fats and dairy. People, lots of more and more people talking about the addiction of dairy these days. And again, I know this could be like a whole nother conversation, but I'm sure many people out there know about like Gabriel Cousins and other people who teach and believe like him, who he believes. I'm just like sharing his own words. And again, this is not to guilt or make anyone feel bad or anything, but he believes very strongly, and he teaches about this, has written about this, and has worked with people one-on-one on this, that everyone needs to find the way that their body most properly needs to eat. And he helps people to find that. He's been vegan for 50 years. He very much believes that veganism is the way, and it's also is the way for everybody. And he helps people find people who have had trouble finding that good way of being vegan. He helps them to understand their body better and their body's specific, unique needs in very, very fine and detailed ways, because we have to be aware of that. We have to make sure that it's not just about like stopping eating all these things. What am I going to replace it with? What am I going to feed my body and fuel my body with? And we have to be careful, and we have to be smart, we have to be knowledgeable, and we have to be educated. So that's a hard thing to do. That sometimes feels like a full-time job. And then, no, it didn't work. I quit. It's not for me. Veganism isn't for everyone, and again, not coming from a place of guilt and not trying to argue or like whatever or debate, but I've heard that so many times. Veganism isn't for everyone. Veganism didn't work for me. It didn't work for a lot of people, but you have to go into the fine details. Like what were the people doing? How were they eating? What food choices were they making? It's not just about like saying no to these things. What were they saying yes to? And were they saying yes to the right things and in the right amounts?
Yes, and I also want to acknowledge Rabbi Akiva, because many, like being the vegan rabbi, he doesn't have to be eating healthy foods. He's just promoting the vegan concept. But I've seen the things that like you post and the things that you're promoting, and there are definitely more towards whole food, plant-based smoothies and like really healthy things. And I really appreciate that, because I feel that there's no, being just vegan isn't enough even from a spiritual perspective. Like even from a spiritual perspective, it's still not the Garden of Eden. And definitely from a health perspective, because coming from somebody who's a health coach that deals with everybody under the sun after their aftermath of not eating well, and then now I have to deal with their problems, it's like, deal with it before you have the problems. And I mean that so strongly from the bottom of my heart, because like, you don't know what I see every single day. All the problems under the sun that can be helped in just like a few weeks of changing your diet. So, and it's very real, and your health is such an important part of the spiritual world, because like Rabbi Akiva said, we have a body and we have a soul, and we have to take care of both of them equally. And in order for us to be actually living our soul's purpose, we have to have a body to facilitate that. So just as important as facilitating as being spiritual and loving what's bigger, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, and connecting to that, we have to take care of our body just the same. And as you take care of your body just the same, you take care of the people around you, you start to feel more energized, and you just feel more in touch with yourself, and you feel good, which is the point of everything, right? We just want to feel good. We want to have pleasure, and you feel good when your body is healthy and when you eat good foods. Now, how can you actually enjoy these foods that make you feel good? That's the question. So, I mean, it's a question, and that's something that definitely I can help with if you want. And I really appreciate, Eva, you saying about the wheatgrass, saying that it curbs your cravings, because it's true. Like if there's something that you're like, something's just not working for me, like I just need something to take the edge off, reducing your cravings for things comes from a high concentration of plants. One really just key element from a nutritional diet standpoint, one of the biggest problems that people have when they're going more plant-based is they don't eat enough. If you're going to have a lot of processed foods, fine, you can have a vegan burger and you can have whatever bread, and you'll think that you're eating enough. But if you're actually going to go whole food plant-based, one of the biggest issues that people have is that they don't eat the quantity that they need, and that's what discourages them. So I'll just say that's a really important tip for all of you to be conscious of, that you're most likely, if you're eating whole food plant-based and not feeling nourished or satisfied, or craving still the meats and craving the processed foods, you're most likely not eating the quantity that you need in order for your body to not have the cravings anymore. But as soon as you hit that quantity threshold, which these baby plants really help with because they're so concentrated, your body, like the trigger of oh, I'm not satisfied, now is no longer like ringing its alarm. That's really an important piece. I don't want to continue to go forever, even though I feel like we totally could. So do you have any last words that you would like to say, or any last questions that you want to read?
I just want to answer really quickly the first thing that Eva said about passages from the Torah, that the children of Israel, they complained for the slav, for meat. They complained for meat even when they were given the manna. That is looked at by the Torah as a horrible thing. They did something wrong by asking for the meat and by complaining that they didn't have meat when they had the most perfect heavenly food around, which Derech Agav, side note, was completely vegan, and some people like to say was a reminder of our original diet in the Garden of Eden. Right? Them complaining for meat in the desert was a sin. That's how it was, referred to as, and they were punished for it. They were punished. It was a plague. People got killed in it with meat still in their mouth, in between their teeth, as the Torah says. So it wasn't a good thing that they complained. And this whole idea of meat being connected to desire, we have to look at the word in Hebrew to really understand it. Right? When the Torah says, at first, it was only sacrificial meat was allowed to be eaten. And once non-sacrificial meat was allowed to be eaten, it calls it in the Torah avat nefesh. Avat nefesh, that comes from the word ta'ava. Ta'ava in Hebrew means not desire, but lust. It often gets translated as desire, but it's a lust. And in Judaism, lust is something that we're supposed to run away from, all kinds of lusts, right? A lot of our spiritual work in this world is about recognizing our lusts and working on ourselves not to give into our lusts. And once again, Rav Kook talks about this, right? He says that in the future, we're going to lose, one, just as a side note, we're going to lose any desire for meat in the future because we're going to return to this higher consciousness. But also we have to understand, right, that like eating meat and lust are intertwined even in the language of the Torah. That's not coming from this good place, right? That we're, yes, why do I want meat? Because I have this lust, but I'm supposed to work on that lust. I'm supposed to overcome it, not give into it. So I just want to say that also.
I'm wondering, I hate to say this, but I just do feel like it would be a good, like, bring it all home. I hate to ask you about this, but I do think that a key here, like Eva was saying, Eva, you're our star girl today, is this morality aspect. That's the reason why I brought you on, right? Like I could talk all day about nutrition and like why I think this makes sense from that state, but why the strong fundamental moral, like yes, right or wrong concept, I think is what motivates people to really make the change. So if you could just like hit home with that, where does that come from?
So there's many teachings in Judaism that talk about compassion for animals, talk about awareness that we're living in God's world, God's creation, that God created this world, and that we have a moral responsibility to protect this world and to protect all the living creatures in it. There are plenty of sources that talk about this. One of the most ancient sources comes from a midrash, an oral teaching that says that after Adam and Eve were created in the Garden of Eden, while they were still in the Garden of Eden, that God gave Adam a tour of the world and said, look at this world, how beautiful it is. I made it all for you. Just beware that you don't destroy it, because if you do, nobody will come after you to fix it. So right away, like almost at the beginning of Judaism, we see intertwined with everything else is this responsibility to recognize our uniqueness amongst all the creations. And with that uniqueness comes a responsibility towards all of creation and all of creations to really bring that morality into our actions and into the world. And then literally anywhere you see it, from Jewish law to Jewish mysticism, you see all kinds of teachings that are connected to the morality and the ethics of keeping in mind that we are meant to limit as much as possible our the pain and suffering that we cause to other creatures and the destruction that we cause to the environment. Now we're living in modern day reality, industrialized, globalized. Everything we do seems to do something bad to the world or some creature in it. Right? It's very, very hard to live a pure. I mean, it's impossible today. It's impossible to live a pure, non-destructive life. And then sometimes people use that as an argument against people who are trying to do anything. It's like, okay, yeah,
you're cutting the plants when they're young. Isn't that sad?
Right. Or where's your shirt from? Or did you eat quinoa today? Or whatever. And on some level, of course, they're all right. That anything we do is creating some kind of unfortunate, result in the world. But we're trying our best. We're trying our best. And I think one of the greatest things that we can do is to change the way that we eat. That through a change in our food choices, we bring an incredible positive change to every level and layer of reality and creation, right? To our own health, to animal welfare, and to environmental health, right? And I'm not going to call it easy, but it's in one action, one decision, one choice, one change has this tremendous aspect on multiple spheres of life. And that's why I think today, in our world today, with what's happening in the, animal agricultural world and all the foods that are coming out of it, it's on some level blasphemy. It's going against such deep values and teachings and morals and ethics of Judaism, that we do, like you're saying, we do have a moral imperative today. It's a moral imperative that we're already given. We're not making this up. We're just going back to the sources, reminding ourselves that the Jewish tradition has been teaching us this for thousands of years, and now we're applying it in a new way, because what's happening in the world around us never happened before our generation, the previous generation. These are brand new things that are happening in the world, and therefore we need to learn about it. And just like, I'll just maybe end with this, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Right, I'm not a Chabadnik, but I respect and love Chabad. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, back in the day when people thought even smoking was not only okay, but maybe even healthy, right? He would have a cigarette every now and then. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, and then one day, one of his Hasidim came into his office with the newspaper for the first time that was reporting that cigarettes are bad for your health. His student read that out loud while he was smoking the cigarette. The Rebbe put out the cigarette and never touched another cigarette again. The second he realized that it was going against the laws of the Torah, right, the laws of health in this case, he stopped. And I think that's what we have to do now with food. We have to realize that the traditional modern way of eating is going against fundamental beliefs, laws, and values of the Jewish tradition, and we have to stamp that out.
Amen. Whew. Who found this cool? Yeah, this is pretty epic. Cherries are kosher. That's the question that we got from this. Just kidding. And I don't know who Rebecca Mansell is, because that's sure as hell not me. Sorry. Okay. So, as always, two things for me. One is, okay, I'm going to be leading a webinar in either a week or two, more so about like what I do to help you to continue to live this lifestyle, whether it's just starting and adding greens in or making a full lifestyle transformation. I have like a 1 week, a 1 month, and a 3 month program where I help you make a complete lifestyle transformation, mind, body, soul. And it's all of this included, not just about the food. I totally am a spiritual lady and I love that stuff, and I'm with you on it. So if that speaks to you, I'm your girl. You can join my Facebook group, which I just posted in here. That just allows you to stay connected in what I do. And a lot of people in there are doing it. So it's just really cool to see and get inspiration every day of different smoothie recipes and different ways people are sprouting this and that. So join my Facebook group. Anybody on here already, I have your email. So you'll be getting an email. So look out for that for a webinar. And then, as always, anytime I do a class, I always give a discount code to anybody who attends. So I'm offering a 15% off discount code, and I'm labeling it Vegan Rabbi just for fun. So anybody who wants to get something, you can always go on my website, browse around, see if there's anything that speaks to you, get yourself a friend or a gift to somebody, a nice, beautiful Sprout Living Foods gift. There's nothing like it. And that is all my spiel. Anybody who's listening, if you're still listening, you're amazing. Congratulations. 800wheatgrass.com is our website. At Perfect Foods Inc. is me on Instagram, constantly giving content and sharing inspiration and benefits on wheatgrass and sprouts and how to use it. Rabbi, give us your last, whatever you'd like to say, and we'll be on our way for a beautiful day.
All right, I'll just say, just in terms of, again, where to find me, akivagrish.com. I'll just put into the chat. Find me on Instagram and Facebook under Vegan Rabbi. And I'll just kind of, put together like a thought or two that we said, already in this program, that, when you look at Jewish tradition, the core, essential value, teaching, driving force is the idea that we are here to fix the brokenness of the world. And as I just said a few minutes ago, there's many things that we can do to fix the world. There's many things that we need to do and that we should do. And we should all find the ways that we can bring healing and fixing to the world. But the one thing that we all can do that will have a tremendous positive impact on the world and help to fix much of the brokenness of the world in one swoop is by looking at our food choices and aligning them better with values of compassion, morality, ethics, spiritual health, environmental stewardship, animal welfare and the like, and just highly encourage everyone to consider that if they haven't already brought that into their life. And like Rebecca said, reach out to Rebecca, reach out to me if you're ever needing help, guidance, have questions. We've been doing this for a long time. We've learned a lot along the way, thank God, and always happy to help and to share.
I am what I eat. Love that, Eva. All right, everyone. Thank you for staying and spending this part of your evening or day with us, and have a beautiful rest of your day. Stay tuned. I'm sure the Vegan Rabbi and I will do more things in the future. So definitely stay tuned to both of us, and have a beautiful day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Rabbi,
Bye.
thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, shalom.
Bye.
Hello. Thanks, Adel. Adel's our girl.
Mazal tov.
Mazel tov, Adel.
Vegan
Bye.
wedding.
Vegan wedding, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Rebecca. Thanks so much. This is great.
Bye-bye. Yeah.
Bye-bye.